Good morning, everyone. We will continue. The topic. And last 2 weeks, last week we talked about Hinayana teaching, and the main point is to let people know that where are our delusion and suffering from, and mainly from this body and this receptacle world that make us generate more ignorance, craving, and hatred, and that's why we created more karma. So the way to cut off the delusion and suffering is to cut off the attachment to the self of the body and mind, mainly the sixth consciousness. And so for Hinayana practitioners, the main goal is to stop exist to this Saha world anymore. And so get out of transcend, to transcend out of the so-called 3 realms and 9 grounds, and to get a so-called liberation. And so make a very short conclusion from the previous 2 talks is the Buddhist fundamental teachings tell us that because we are ignorant, we have delusion, we don't know the truth, don't know the reality. So that's why we create karma. We all our behaviors are without flow. And so we have suffering. That's basically what the 4 Noble Truths are trying to tell us in the beginning. So what when we talk about the 12 link of dependent origination, there are the multi-layers of the ignorance, delusion, and the karma, and the suffering. So for example, the fundamental ignorance causes the so-called the karma is the volitional formation. So the karma always try to drive us to somewhere. So this karma, the volitional formation, causes our sixth consciousness to get birth, to have a body and have 6 organs and get in contact with this outside world and has a feeling. And then another levels of delusion is we have craving, we like this, dislike that, and then we have grasping. Then we accumulate more karmas called becoming that go back to our fundamental ignorance again. And then we have more suffering because we have to be born and go through the aging and death again and again. Okay, and so that's the previous 2 talks are all about. But then the question comes that, yeah, we can cut off the existence of the bodily existence, and also the receptacle world. But for example, when we fall asleep, or pass out for some reason, so we lost the awareness, the sensation about this body, and our 6th consciousness stop reaction. And where are we? And when we wake up, all this come back again. So when we are not aware of it, does it disappear and come back again, or like exist in some form and just come, just like we wake up? And also for the realms, if you remember that the 3 realms, the highest realm is called Formless Realm. So for the beings in the formless realm, they don't have physical body, and they enter into a very deep samadhi. So their sixth consciousness does not functioning. And so at this point, the body and the mind stop they are not active, and or they don't have body. But when they get out of the samadhi, they still come back to to any realm, any sixth realm that they can rebirth into. But they still carry the information, they still carry the karma. So the question comes after the Hinayana teaching is that how do we hold on to this bodily existence a lifetime after lifetime without ceasing? The so-called bodily existence, where are the information stored? What is the entity that transmigrate? It's definitely not if I die and I reborn into something, some beings. Definitely this is not my body. I'm going to get a new body. And then my habit, my karma, the wrongdoings I committed before, got to store somewhere. Otherwise, how can I receive my karmic retribution? So that's another levels of questioning, So the body and receptacle is not the origin of life yet. There is something further that might be the origin of life. So now the next teaching is trying to answer what is the entity that carries all the information and continue one's life after life. We've got to find out in order to know our origin. Okay, so last year there is a movie called Soul. If you watch it online, I think it's free movie. I watch it somewhere. That the whole movie is trying to contemplate the question is the origin of human personality and the concept of determinism. So this Joe that who accidentally died, so his soul and body separated, and so the whole story is trying to share that how this soul trying to get back to his body, and along the journey, then the movie taught us that how the so-called heavens is operating, how they take the souls and after people die, and how they make judgment, where you go, and then what your personality is depends on what you have done in your past life. And so you have a defined fate about for your next life. So the reason I point out is that the concept of soul that has been bringing out in many religion and the faith system. So there are like two groups of thinking. Okay, one is from the philosopher like Plato or Descartes. Plato said that we do not learn new things, but recall things we knew before birth. So we must have a soul. Okay, and Descartes wrote that because we have no conception of the body as thinking in any way, we have reason to believe that every kind of thought which exists in us belongs to the soul. So we do not create anything new. Everything is, stored in our soul. We just pour out, from the soul. I should do this. I should react this way, and I should make this decision and all that. And the other group think that we don't need a soul. For example, in 1949, psychologist Hecht, he claimed that the mind is the integration of the activity of the brain. So everything happened in the brain, and the love, the hatred, the sensation, the personality, our memories, everything's come from our brain. So we don't need a soul. So most function attributed to the soul that can be explained by the brain. That's most of the scientists think this way. So we need a soul. Do we need a soul or not? So we need to know what is the definition for the soul. So I pull out some definition. In religion and philosophy, souls means the immaterial aspect or essence of a human being. In other words, as a human being, we have this body, but we still have physical body here. But we have the other aspect that is in us is not physical, spiritual. And in theology, the soul is further defined as the part of individual which partakes the divinity and often is considered to survive the death of the body. So after we die, after we lost the body, after we lost the sensation, something still exists. That's called soul. And depending on the philosophical system, a soul can either be mortal or immortal. But here, one thing I need to point out, just like in the movie, if I am a human being, I died, my soul go to heaven, and there is a judgment, and to see when I can get rebirth, and or what kind of family I should go, what kind of personality I would have, and all that. But I'm still a human, I will not change to become a dog. I will not go to hell. My soul is just basically change a body. And so is that really is? Different religions have different interpretation. But for Buddhism, we don't think that way. And before I get to the Buddhist point of view, I would like to point out what the current, what is so-called pioneer scientists think about life, about the soul or the consciousness. So Dr. Mitchell, that he was the astronaut for Apollo 14, and he founded an Institute of Noetic Science in 1973. The reason he founded this foundation is to study consciousness. And the reason why he wants to study consciousness is because he had a very special experience when he, on the journey, came back to Earth from the moon. So as you know that the spacecraft in the space, the spacecraft need to rotate, a certain time for a certain angle, and trying to balance the heat from the sun, so that the spacecraft will not heat up from one point. So during this process of rotation and on the journey back to Earth, he had a very special feeling that he feel the totality or the oneness with everything that exists. That's his words, okay? And then he realized that what we had barely begun to probe the deepest mystery of the universe is the consciousness itself. So he said that I realized that the molecules of my body, the molecules of the spacecraft, and the molecules of my partner's body were created in star system. That's how the matter in our universe is created. And I was akin to the stars. Basically, his body, his colleague's body, the physical body of spacecraft, and the whole universe, all the stars in the universe united. There is no separate lines between the body, my body, and my colleague's body, or my spacecraft and other stars. No, this kind of boundary. So he tried to find a philosophical system, any religions that can explain his experience, and he found Buddhism, and he found a concept called nirvana, no self, emptiness, and all that. And so he founded this foundation, tried to study consciousness in a scientific way. And then later on, he had a dialogue, I think it's 2000 something. He had a dialogue in Taiwan with our late master Sheng Yan. If you are interested in these articles, you can go to our website and you can download the e-files. So the topic is called the Buddha Mind, Universe, and Awakening. In this dialogue, Dr. Mitchell brought up his experience to our master and tried to get an answer about nirvana. And then our master replied him that this is a very special and rare experience from a non-practitioner that can experience this oneness with the universe. But this is still a body or worldly or sensation in this mundane world. It's not a true nirvana, but it's very special experience, so that once his concept can go beyond the bondage of scientific knowledge or the so-called mundane common experience for all the ordinary people. And so our master brought up the idea called the eighth consciousness from Buddhist Yoga chart school. And before we get to what the consciousness in Buddhist point of view, that Dr. Mitchell's personal comments in the book saying that the Big Bang Theory is on its way out. Okay, so we talk about Big Bang Theory, right? About how this universe formed. Dr. Mitchell is MIT graduate and Ph.D. On astronomy or something. And so he is very well, high-educated scientist, but he say the Big Bang Theory is on its way out. Time, typo here, time is all local measure. The local means Earth, okay? Which we created on Earth in our own presence. Nature itself only knows process and sequence it. And sequence, process and sequence. It does not measure. It just as is. We measure. Human beings measure. And mind and matter does not interact. The idea is that the matter is just the compressed energy and information patterns of energy. And the ability to use it is consciousness. Okay. So everything is stored as an energy, pattern of energy. It is our consciousness that do the process to make things happen as what we perceive. That's his point. And this is basically what I'm trying to point out. The next level of called consciousness, Vijnana in Sanskrit. So if you go to read the Sastra of Zhongmi, you will find this chapter is very short, but it means a lot. Okay, and I try to point out some key points so that you know what's in it, and I basically cannot talk about it in detail. And I give several talks on the topic of Yogacara, the consciousness, the eight consciousness, and the 100 Dharma. You can check out from our website or YouTube. So first of all, the teaching of the third level, okay, the teaching of the phenomenal appearances. Saying, the Zhongmi say that all sentient beings from time without beginning inherently have 8 kinds of consciousness. And the 8 consciousness, Alaya Vijnana, is the fundamental basis. It instantaneously evolves into the body of the senses, the receptacle world, and the seeds that transform and generates the other 7 consciousness. So the Alaya Vijnana is the basis for all our existence. And how does that work out? I used iceberg diagram. I try to explain how the 8 consciousnesses, interact or process, so that we know who we are, and then we perceive what this world looks like. So here, above the sea level, the blue part of the iceberg, the sky blue part of the iceberg, you can see that our organs, 5 organs, body, tongue, nose, ear, eyes, and perceive the signals from outside. And so we know the touch, we know the taste, we know the smell, and we know the sound, and we can see the color, the outside object. Okay, and why we can see that, why we can see red apple, why we can hear the music, why we can smell, banana or pineapple, how we can tell it's banana or pineapple, or it's bitter taste or it's a sour taste, or this is rough skin or it's a smooth skin. It's the organ just perceive the signal as it is, as they are. But it is the body sense consciousness, the tongue sensation consciousness, the nose consciousness, ear and eyes consciousness that help us to tell that what the things are, with the help of the 6 consciousness. Okay, so go deeper to the 6 consciousness. Okay, so how the 6 consciousness can help the eye consciousness to tell that what you see is banana, yellow banana, and why you know that this is red apple. Okay, and maybe for I don't know, for monkey, maybe they see the same thing, the yellow banana and red apple. But for other beings, they may not be able to see the same thing. Okay, and so for people who have a colorblind problem, they perceive different color system, and so all this is controlled by the database that we can access through the control of the seventh consciousness. In other words, when I try to access the database, there is a control system here. For example, for the computer, it's my password, my authority, what level of authority I have defined in my password. And so if I am very high authority, my password can allow me to access maybe 90% of the database. But if I'm in a low level, my authority only can access very small part of the database. And in other words, the seventh consciousness, the job for the seventh consciousness is to control what we can access in the database, which is the eighth consciousness we call Alaya. Okay, so what we perceive outside is actually processed inside the mind. Okay, so that's what the next point. The first point is the Alaya is the basis to provide, to support the process for the rest of the seventh consciousness. And the second point is the sixth and the seventh consciousness, because they are obscured by ignorance, subsequently cling to the subjective and objective manifestations as a substantial self and substantial things, self and the Dharma. The idea, the concept, or the attachment to the self and to the Dharma is actually operated by the sixth and the seventh consciousness. Okay, very short sentence, but says a lot. And I just use a very, it seems complicated, but this is the simplest way that I can explain to you that actually the all the eight consciousnesses, when they try to make discrimination, they were further divided to the objective part and subjective parts. Okay, so blue part is how we perceive the outside world from the first five consciousness, it's my right lower parts. And when the five organs receive the energy pattern from outside, and this signal needs the help from the sixth consciousness. We go up, sixth consciousness, the provide information that tells the first five consciousness that, okay, what you see is the red apple. But how this objective parts of the sixth consciousness come from? It comes from the eighth consciousness database. Okay, so in the database, there is the red apples information there. So the sixth consciousness need to match what the first five consciousness get and match it, and then tell you, okay, this is apple, red apple. And this database comes from the attachment of the seventh consciousness to the subjective part of the eighth consciousness. If you don't understand, that's okay. But you just remember, the eighth consciousness intertwined each other. They have a mechanism to process all the information that we get. And in order for us, our mind, to tell us what it is, and like it or not, where should I react? You know, I don't like red apple. Should I throw it away or should I give it to others? All these judgments come from sixth consciousness, discrimination, based on the database in the eighth consciousness, which is controlled by the seventh consciousness. Okay, so, you know, it's not like you see what you see is really what you see. You hear does not means it's really what you hear. Our judgment is our own judgment. May not be right, may not be wrong. So I like this so-called, the very popular now, lots of companies trying to develop a system, try to for our future technology. Is called facial recognition system. I try to find a common algorithm for that, but obviously it's a know-how for each company. That's how they make money or make their own company spatial. But overall, first, facial recognition system, they have a camera, right? And then take the image, light reflection, the photon reflection from everyone's face and catch the image. It's like this. So they get a reflection, and they need to further refining. Okay, refining. So we have a sharp nose, round eyes, and eyeballs. All that get very clear. And through this refining system, need to get to a so-called classifying system. For example, you know, they can know that, okay, this is white skin or yellow skin or black skin, you know. So in the database for matching the data, the database has everything for female, for male, for white people, yellow people, red people, and black people, right? And in the first round, they might like quickly classify this is a white female. Then go to that database, try to match and refining and match. And finally, they identify who that person is. Okay. It's very similar to our eighth consciousness, okay? The first five consciousness is basically doing this camera thing, you know, receive the signal. And there is no judgment, okay? But through the seventh consciousness help, they try to refine and try to identify or make discrimination about what this image is. But how they get to the database through the seventh consciousness, you know, try to classify or categorize, you know, what this, and then the eighth consciousness is the whole database, but you only access a certain part of it, and then try to match, and finally, oh, this is red apple, okay? But for Buddhists, the consciousness concept in Yogacara, this idea, remember that this system, the consciousness system, need to explain not just for human beings, not just for the six realms, and not just for, you know, the three realms of desire realm, forms realm, and formless realm. This system need to explain to the whole existence of beings. So here you can say that, a butterfly, they receive signal of the flower as well. And then they need to refine, where is the, I want to get honey. I need to where that part of the flower is that I can get honey. So they have a refining system to identify the spot. And how they identify? Butterfly has their classifying system and access the database. Remember that the eighth consciousness has everything, but because they are butterflies, so the seventh consciousness attached to that I am butterfly. I have this physical body. I have my very complicated eyes, and so what the butterfly can access is the database for butterfly. They cannot access the database for human beings. Okay, so because of this kind of controlling the controlling from the seventh consciousness. So, for example, water. I mentioned this several times. Water for human beings is, from the Buddhist literature. Water for human being is crystal clear liquid that we can drink, right? But water for heavenly beings is clear crystal. But water for ghost, what they perceive, H2O, becomes stinging blood, So it's like the same energy information, but through different organs from different beings, and they get through the database of different parts of the database through the attachment of the seventh consciousness. Then we process the information in a different way, and then we perceive different world. Even though we exist in this same space, we perceive this world differently. So here, the Sastra says that it is like the case of dreaming. The mind manifests itself in the semblance of the phenomenal appearance of a variety of external objects. When one is dreaming, one clings to them as substantially existing external things. But as soon as one awakened, one realized that they were merely the transformation of the dream, or the transformation of the mind. Okay, illusory mind. So that is the main point that the Yogacara school tried to tell us what we perceive, including outside objects in this perceptible world, including our body, and including our emotions, are all the manifestation of the consciousness inside, not outside. So these levels of teachings are very important. It's what we call the transformation. Okay, so this is just trying to show you Yogacara school has a very well-established system trying to tell us that how the mind composed, what the mind composed with eight consciousness, also 5 mental factors. And we call it mind, and how the mind interacts with outside, so-called outside object, and manifest as the form, and how we process the information with the so-called pseudodharma, For example, time and space are pseudo-dharma defined by human beings. For example, gain and loss, also a pseudo-dharma. And how this operates in our mundane conditioned world. And the Yogacara call it the appearance of consciousness. And also, most importantly, we need to know how we can transcend this mundane world, this mundane operation, and get to see the true nature of the consciousness, and to know what are the unconditioned dharmas is, what is the unconditioned dharma is. Okay, so this is a very vast amount of teaching here. But the major points, like I mentioned before, the eighth consciousness is the basis, the alaya, and also the rest, the sixth and seventh consciousness are the major point for us to transform, so that we won't attach to that the self is real and the Dharma is real. And then and how the things we perceive is transient, and it's not real outside, but manifestation from the inside. Okay, that's the key point. So oftentimes you will, you were being asked, which comes first, consciousness or matter, consciousness or life, right? For scientists, matter comes first. The universe formed first, and then living beings, then human beings. And consciousness or life. So when we get birth, is that we have a life, then we are conscious. Or we have consciousness first, then we have life. So and scientists and philosophers think differently. Okay, but for Yogacara, that the matter, the physical world manifests inside. Okay, so there is no which comes first. Is matter exists because consciousness exists, and life, the so-called lifespan, is a definition by human beings' concept. From consciousness point of view, life is always exist. Okay, so here we need to transcend that, the outside, the periodical kind of things, existence. Actually, the consciousness exists all the time, and it continues our existence all the time. And the reason why we will think that there is an outside and inside, the reason why we think that I was born, or I'm dying, I'm dead, this kind of concepts is because the attachment of the consciousness to the self, the substantial self and the substantial Dharma. Once we can transcend, transform this operation of the consciousness, then we will see things in a different way. Okay, so here, when we need to go to, one thing I need to point out is when we need to go to the next level from Hinayana teaching to Mahayana teaching, one of the point is very important, is called Bodhichitta. Bodhichitta, from the Hinayana teachings, the major practice is called detachment. Detachment of the delusion, cut off delusion, cut off the suffering, cut off the bodily existence, cut off the perception for this world. But for the Mahayana teachings, is I accept, I know the existence, I know all the perception, but I transform it. So here, bodhicitta is very important in order for us to, first of all, accept all the phenomena operated by the mind. We cannot cut off, like, I don't want this perception. I want this perception, okay? Because if we do that, we cannot see the overall functioning of the consciousness. We cut it in half. So in order to, in other words, we need to know the totality of the eighth consciousness in order to transform it, in order to go beyond it. Okay, so when as a Buddhist practitioner, don't deny anything. We don't deny anything. We accept everything. At the same time, we want to know the true nature of all the appearance. If we deny any appearance, we are not able to see the true nature of it. That's very important. Accept everything. At the same time, we want everything, every being to, we believe that every being has the same nature, because all the beings, all the things, phenomena exist through our own consciousness. So we got to get the totality of the existence in order to see the true nature of it. That's bodhicitta is very important. If we don't generate bodhicitta, first of all, we cannot perceive the totality of the function of the mind. At the same time, we don't have the power to go through the journey to transcend, because we have, we have difficulty, we have all that. Bodhicitta can help us to give us power, to go through the journey when we try to accept everything, when we try to transcend everything. So now, our framework, our concept of the existence from the so-called sixth realm, or the 3 realms of 9 realms, to 10 realms. Okay, then there is a Pratibhava Buddha, and there is a Sarvaka Buddha. There's a Bodhisattva, the very important Bodhisattva path, and the Buddha. Okay, so the mind is complete because all the 10 realms exist, even though they are the manifestation of the mind, but it is also the functions of the mind. Okay, so entity and functioning, even though they show in a different way, but they are the 2 sides of the same coin. You cannot deny one of them in order to see. You cannot deny one side and in order to see the other side. Then you still cannot see the totality of the mind. Okay, so now for the Mahayana teachings on the phenomenal appearances, the teaching is so-called Yogacara, or the consciousness only. The teaching trying to help us to detach, to break out the attachment to the self and to the Dharma. So here, the dependent origination is on Alaya. So we call it Alaya dependent origination. So it starts from Alaya, the eighth consciousness, the storehouse of all seeds. Okay, and then there are the seeds that carry equal property. For example, good seeds carried, it will exist as good seeds, bad seeds as bad seeds always, and the seeds are always changing. And also there's a seed. Okay, sorry, I didn't translate. The seeds that manifest our body and receptacle world. So when we go to this, from the eighth consciousness, there is a seventh consciousness that attach to the eighth, the subjective parts of the eighth consciousness as the self. Okay, then the body's sensory organs and receptacle world C can, ripe. And then also that the sixth consciousness can access to the seeds of bad and good and neutral from the eighth consciousness. Okay, and also this through the seventh consciousness controlling, then the sixth consciousness, the first to fifth consciousness do the worldly cognition part, and the sixth consciousness to do the recognition, discrimination, judgment, and all that. Okay, then we generate again suffering, dukkha, and vexations, klesha. Okay, and also here, the seventh consciousness feedback to the eighth consciousness, as well as the sixth consciousness feedback to the eighth consciousness. So the eighth consciousness, even as a storehouse, is not a fix. All the six got pull out and put back, pull out and put back, perfume, make it stronger or, make it lesser, that kind of very complicated process. Okay, so that's called Alaya, dependent origination. And so the key points for the Mahayana teaching on phenomenal appearance in searching the origin of life is that our body existence is merely the transformation of consciousness. So the consciousness constitutes the root of body existence. So the consciousness is the origin of life that we need to, this is the teaching, the find out from the Mahayana teaching on phenomenal appearance. And then so the other quickly goes through, can we change who we are? The reason we try to find out the origin of life is because we are not so miserable here, and the origin of life is there, and we try to go there, right? All the teaching at different levels will teach us how to transcend, how to practice, how to get to the origin of life. And Yogacara the same way. It's called transformation of the consciousness into wisdom. Okay, so the sixth consciousness, we need to transform it into a wondrous observing wisdom. Instead of like discriminate, what is a good apple, this is a bad apple. Sorry, we went to pick apple last week, so I keep using apple. This is a bad apple, this is a good apple. It's apple and equally good, equally exists as apple. And also the consciousness become the wisdom of knowing the nature of essential identity. Okay, so we don't attach to like, this is me. We need to open up this self-attachment in order to know everything. And the eighth consciousness, we need to transform, because all the seeds in the eighth consciousness are defiled. They are not pure. So that's why when we pull out from the eighth consciousness, we always make the wrong perception. We cannot see the true nature of it. And also we make the wrong decision. We make the strange judgments and all that. So we need to transform all the seeds in the eighth consciousness into a pure seeds. And so that we can have a so-called the great perfect mirror wisdom. Okay, that's the main teaching for us to help us to get to what our origins are. Okay, so the problem is for this teaching, is that real, the origin yet? Okay, for this Mahayana teachings on phenomenal appearance, the questions comes. If the object evolved is illusory, okay, because all the 8 consciousness, what I perceive are illusory. How can the consciousness that evolve be real? In other words, if I see these things are illusory, this is illusory. Objectivity part is illusory. How can the subjectivity parts is real? For example, when I was in a dream, I see the things are illusory. But is the mind in my dream my real mind? When I get mad in a dream, I kill someone. Did I commit a karma? Is that really my true mind? I don't want to, when I woke up, I don't want to kill that person. I don't want to kill. But in my dream, I kill that person. So the question is, if consciousness, like in here, the Yogacara school taught us that, what you perceive are all illusory. Now, the perceiving mind, how could it be real if the objects are illusory? So it's not there yet, the origin of life yet. There got to be something deeper and further in order to find out the origin of life. So next week, we will talk about the next topic about non-duality, talk about the emptiness. That is basically we get into the Chan school now. So my time is up, and so maybe quick question or something. Anyone has questions? Anyone has question?
I haven't seen any hand raising. From your chart, I know we are not there yet because there are 2 more lines. That's blank.
Yeah, 2 more colors, 2 more rows.
But we're almost there. Thank you, Fashi, for the wonderful teaching.
So if you are interested in Yogacara, so I have a talk on the 8th consciousness, and I also have a talk on the 100 Dharma, and you can go back to, I think maybe Facebook, our website, and also our YouTube account. You can maybe pull out some of the talk and try to find out the detail. Okay, so my next 2 talks, which are very, very important for Chan School, are in December. Okay, I think it's the 2nd and 3rd week of December. So I'll see you then.